Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Gregory Hollister stood in his mahogany-paneled office on the 42nd floor, gazing out at the Denver skyline as snow began to dust the Rocky Mountains in the distance. At 38, he had built an empire from nothing. Hollister Security Solutions now employed over 300 people and held contracts with half the Fortune 500 companies in the region. His steel-gray eyes reflected the same cold precision that had made him legendary in the private security world. The framed photo on his desk showed what appeared to be the perfect family. Gregory with his arm around his wife Camila, their 4-year-old daughter Emma perched on his shoulders, all three smiling at the camera during last summer's vacation in Aspen. But Gregory knew the truth behind that smile, had known for exactly 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. His assistant knocked and entered. "Mr. Hollister, your wife called about Thanksgiving arrangements." "Thank you, Beverly." Gregory's voice carried the same measured tone that had once convinced hostile foreign governments to hire his services. "Tell her I'll handle the details." After Beverly left, Gregory opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. Inside were photographs, phone records, hotel receipts, and surveillance reports that painted a devastating picture. His wife of 7 years, Camila, had been having an affair with Dr. Trevor Richmond, a prominent neurosurgeon at Denver General. The irony wasn't lost on Gregory. He made his living uncovering secrets, yet his own wife had been deceiving him for 8 months. But Gregory Hollister wasn't a man who acted on emotion. He was a strategist, a chess player who thought 15 moves ahead. While other men might have confronted their cheating wives in fits of rage, Gregory had spent the last 4 months planning something far more elaborate and permanent. His phone buzzed. A text from Camila. "Can't wait for Thanksgiving at Dad's. Emma's so excited, red heart." Gregory stared at the heart emoji for a long moment, then deleted the message. Tomorrow would be Thanksgiving, and it would indeed be memorable. He made sure of that. The elevator doors opened to reveal his security chief, Marcus Wright, a former Marine who'd served under Gregory in Afghanistan. "Everything's in place, boss. Your father-in-law received the package this morning, and he understands the importance of following the instructions exactly to the letter, though he still doesn't know why." Gregory nodded. Robert Vasquez, Camila's father, was a simple man who'd worked 30 years as a mechanic before retiring. He loved his daughter fiercely and trusted Gregory implicitly. The trust would be crucial for what came next. The other preparations? Dr. Richmond received his invitation. "He'll be there tomorrow, just as you planned." Gregory closed the folder and locked it back in his drawer. "Then it's time for our final act, Marcus. 7 years of marriage, and my wife thinks she can make a fool of Gregory Hollister. She's about to learn that some betrayals come with consequences she never imagined." As he left his office that evening, Gregory reflected on his journey. Born to a teenage mother who abandoned him at 6, raised by an alcoholic grandfather who died when Gregory was 16, he learned early that the world showed no mercy to the weak. The military had sharpened his natural ruthlessness, and the private sector had rewarded it handsomely. He'd built everything through discipline, calculation, and an absolute refusal to forgive those who crossed him. When a business partner had tried to steal clients 3 years ago, Gregory had systematically destroyed the man's reputation, his marriage, and his financial future. When a government official had attempted to shake him down for bribes, Gregory had gathered enough evidence to send the man to federal prison. Now his own wife had joined the ranks of his enemies, and Gregory Hollister had never left an enemy standing. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Betrayal. Camila Hollister hummed softly as she packed Emma's overnight bag, her movements graceful and unhurried. At 32, she retained the beauty that had first caught Gregory's attention at a charity gala 7 years ago. Dark hair that cascaded past her shoulders, warm brown eyes, and a smile that could disarm the most suspicious businessman. What she'd lost over the years was the spark that had once made their conversations last until dawn. "Mommy," "Can I bring Mr. Bear to Grandpa's?" Emma asked from her position on the floor, where she was carefully arranging her stuffed animals in order of size. "Of course, sweetheart." Camilla's voice carried a warmth that Gregory rarely heard anymore. Their daughter was the one pure thing left in their deteriorating marriage, though Emma was too young to understand the tension that had grown between her parents. What Emma didn't know, what nobody knew except Trevor, was that Camilla had already made her decision. After Thanksgiving, she would ask Gregory for a divorce. Trevor had been pressuring her for months to leave her husband, painting pictures of the life they could build together. A renowned neurosurgeon with a reputation for saving lives that others considered hopeless, Trevor Richmond was everything Gregory wasn't. Warm, spontaneous, openly emotional. The affair had started innocently enough. Emma had fallen from her bicycle last spring, requiring stitches that brought them to Denver General's emergency room. Dr. Richmond had handled the case personally, his gentle manner with Emma immediately winning Camilla over. When he'd called the next day to check on Emma's recovery, their conversation had stretched for an hour. Coffee meetings followed, ostensibly to discuss Emma's healing. Then dinners, justified as medical consultations. By summer, they were meeting at the Riverside Hotel twice a week, lost in a passion that Camilla had forgotten existed. Trevor understood her in ways Gregory never had. Where her husband was calculating and cold, Trevor was impulsive and warm. Where Gregory planned every conversation like a business negotiation, Trevor laughed spontaneously and told her secrets he'd never shared with anyone. "Is Daddy coming with us to Grandpa's?" Emma asked, looking up from her animals. "He'll meet us there, baby. He has some work to finish first." This was partly true. Gregory had insisted on driving separately, claiming he needed to stop at the office first. Camilla suspected he was simply avoiding spending time alone with her family. Her father had never quite approved of Gregory, finding him too intense, too controlled. "That man doesn't know how to relax," Robert Vasquez had said after their wedding. "Makes me nervous, the way he watches everything." Her phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. "Missing you already. Can't wait until we can stop hiding." Camilla quickly deleted the message, a habit she'd developed over the months. Gregory's work and security had made her paranoid about digital trails, though she doubted he suspected anything. Her husband might be brilliant at uncovering corporate espionage, but he'd never shown interest in her personal life. What Camilla didn't know was that Gregory had been watching her for months through the very surveillance network he'd built for his business. Hidden cameras in their home, GPS trackers on her car, keystroke loggers on her laptop, all legally installed on devices he owned, making the surveillance perfectly legal if morally questionable. He'd watch her delete thousands of text messages. He'd seen her fabricate elaborate lies about girls' nights out and charity meetings. He'd recorded her phone calls with Trevor, including the one 2 weeks ago where they'd planned their future together, complete with Trevor's promise to help her get full custody of Emma. That particular conversation had sealed both their fates. As Camilla finished packing, she felt a strange mix of guilt and anticipation. After tomorrow, everything would change. She'd tell Gregory the truth, file for divorce, and start the life she'd been dreaming about. Trevor had already proposed, producing a ring that cost more than Gregory spent on her in a year. She glanced at the family photo on her dresser, Gregory's arm around her at Emma's 3rd birthday party, both of them smiling for the camera. But even in the photo, his smile didn't reach his eyes. It never had, she realized. Gregory Hollister smiled like a predator showing its teeth. Tomorrow at her father's house, surrounded by family and warmth, she would finally work up the courage to end this charade. She had no idea that her husband had already planned the ending himself. Chapter 3. The Yucky Powder. Robert Vasquez stood in his modest kitchen, staring at the small vial of white powder Gregory had given him the day before. His son-in-law's instructions had been specific. Add exactly 1 teaspoon to the turkey's seasoning rub. Tell no one, and trust that it was for the family's own good. "It's a special herb blend from Afghanistan," Gregory had explained. "Something I learned about during my service. It'll make the turkey unlike anything you've ever tasted. But it has to be our secret. The effect is ruined if people know it's coming." Robert had served 2 tours in Vietnam himself, and he understood the bond between soldiers. If Gregory said this special seasoning was important, then Robert would follow orders. Besides, his son-in-law had never steered him wrong. The man might be intense, but he provided well for Camila and Emma. What Robert didn't know was that the powder wasn't a seasoning at all. It was a concentrated emetic compound that Gregory had acquired through his military contacts. Harmless in small doses, but guaranteed to cause violent nausea and vomiting within 30 minutes of consumption. The dosage Gregory had calculated would make everyone sick enough to require medical attention, but not sick enough to cause permanent damage. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. Camila arrived with Emma, both bundling into the house with cheeks reddened from the November cold. "Grandpa!" Emma launched herself into Robert's arms, and he lifted her easily despite his 63 years. "There's my favorite granddaughter," he said, spinning her around the living room. "I'm your only granddaughter, Grandpa." Emma giggled. "That's what makes you my favorite." Camila hugged her father, breathing in the familiar scent of Old Spice and motor oil that had defined her childhood. "Where's Gregory?" "He called 20 minutes ago," Robert said. "Running late, but should be here by 3. What they didn't know was that Gregory was parked 3 blocks away, monitoring the house through wireless cameras he'd installed during his last visit. He watched his wife help her father in the kitchen, watched Emma play with the dog, watched them all prepare for what they assumed would be a normal family dinner. At 2:47, Dr. Trevor Richmond's silver BMW pulled into the driveway. Robert looked confused. "I wasn't expecting company." "Oh," Camila said, her face flushing. "I hope you don't mind. Trevor mentioned he didn't have family plans, and I thought." "The more the merrier," Robert said, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. His daughter's friendship with the doctor had always seemed oddly intense. Trevor entered with flowers for Camila and a bottle of expensive wine for Robert. Tall and distinguished at 42, with prematurely silver hair and kind green eyes, he looked like Central Casting's idea of a trustworthy physician. Emma immediately gravitated toward him, charmed by his gentle attention and his willingness to get on the floor and play with her toys. "Family tradition," Robert announced when Camila and Trevor both offered to help in the kitchen. "I cooked Thanksgiving dinner alone. Everyone out." In his surveillance post, Gregory smiled grimly. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The turkey went into the oven at 3:15, seasoned with Gregory's special powder. Robert followed his son-in-law's instructions precisely, working alone in the kitchen while the others watched football in the living room. Through his cameras, Gregory watched Trevor's hand rest on Camila's knee, watched them exchange the kind of intimate glances that spoke of deep familiarity. Gregory arrived at 4 o'clock, carrying a pie from Emma's favorite bakery and wearing the mask of devoted husband and father he'd perfected over the years. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing Camila's cheek and noting how she stiffened at his touch. "Trevor, what a pleasant surprise." "Hope you don't mind the intrusion," Trevor said, standing to shake hands. His grip was firm but not challenging, the handshake of a man who believed himself to be among friends. "Not at all. Family is family." They sat down to dinner at 5:30. Robert carved the turkey with obvious pride, the meat glistening with its special seasoning. Gregory served Emma first, but only vegetables and mashed potatoes. "Daddy, I want turkey too," Emma protested. "In a minute, sweetheart. Let Grandpa finish carving." But Gregory had no intention of giving his daughter any of the poisoned meat. His plan required her to remain healthy, to serve as the innocent witness whose testimony would be believed without question. As the adults began eating, Gregory pushed food around his plate without taking a bite. "Robert, this turkey is incredible. What's your secret?" "Just family recipes passed down through generations," Robert said proudly, taking another large bite. Trevor nodded enthusiastically. "Best I've ever had." "Camila, you never told me your father was such a chef." 28 minutes after they'd started eating, Robert excused himself to the bathroom. His face had turned pale, and he was pressing his hand against his stomach. "Dad, you okay?" Camila called after him. 2 minutes later, Trevor followed, looking green around the gills. "Must have been something I ate earlier," he mumbled. By 35 minutes, both men were violently ill. Camila, who had eaten less, was beginning to feel nauseous but was still functional. "What's happening?" she asked Gregory, panic creeping into her voice. "Food poisoning, looks like. We need to get them to a hospital." But Emma, who had eaten none of the turkey, was feeling perfectly fine. When she saw the adults getting sick, she tugged on Gregory's sleeve. "Daddy, I saw Grandpa put yucky powder in the turkey," she whispered. "Like medicine powder, but it smelled bad." Gregory knelt down to Emma's level, making sure Camila could hear every word. "What kind of powder, sweetheart?" "White powder from a little bottle. He said it was secret." Camila's face went white, not from the mild poisoning, but from sudden understanding. "Gregory, what did you do?" "Test the food," Gregory said quietly, pulling a home testing kit from his jacket, one designed to detect common poisons. "Use this." With shaking hands, Camila tested a sample of the turkey. The kit turned bright red, indicating the presence of toxic compounds. "Oh God," she whispered. "Dad, Trevor, call 911, Gregory said. "Now." As Camila fumbled for her phone, Gregory's smile was hidden from everyone except the surveillance cameras he'd positioned throughout the house. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. By morning, the entire city would know that someone had tried to poison the Hollister family's Thanksgiving dinner. What they wouldn't know, what only Gregory knew, was that this was just the beginning. Chapter 4. The investigation begins. Detective Ray Kowalski arrived at Denver General Hospital at 11:47 p.m., his weathered face showing the exhaustion of a man who'd been called away from his own family dinner. At 51, he'd worked enough food poisoning cases to know that most were accidents, restaurants with poor hygiene, holiday cooks who didn't understand proper food safety. But this case felt different from the moment he read the initial report. Gregory Hollister sat in the hospital waiting room, his 4-year-old daughter asleep in his lap. His wife paced nearby, still pale from mild poisoning, but alert enough to give a statement. The contrast between them was striking. Gregory appeared calm and controlled, while Camila seemed on the verge of collapse. "Mr. Hollister? I'm Detective Kowalski. I understand your family was poisoned tonight." "That's correct. My father-in-law insisted on cooking dinner alone. When people started getting sick, my daughter mentioned seeing him add some kind of powder to the turkey." Kowalski's pen paused over his notepad. "Your daughter saw this?" "Emma is very observant for her age. She told me her grandfather used yucky powder from a small bottle." "And where is Mr. Vasquez now?" "I see you, along with Dr. Richmond, who was our guest for dinner." Kowalski noted the names, then looked up sharply. "Dr. Trevor Richmond, the neurosurgeon?" "Yes. He's a family friend." The detective caught something in Gregory's tone, a careful neutrality that seemed forced. "How well do you know Dr. Richmond?" "He treated my daughter for an injury last spring. My wife has maintained a friendship with him since then." Camila stopped pacing. "Gregory, what are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, dear. I'm simply answering the detective's questions." Kowalski sensed undercurrents he didn't understand yet. "Mrs. Hollister, can you tell me about your relationship with Dr. Richmond?" "He's been very kind to our family. When Emma needed follow-up care, he always made time for us." "How often do you see him?" Camila's eyes flicked to Gregory, then back to the detective. "Occasionally. For coffee, sometimes dinner. Professional consultations about Emma's recovery." Gregory's expression remained neutral, but Kowalski caught the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Hollister, do you have any idea why your father-in-law might have poisoned the turkey?" "None whatsoever. Robert has never shown any signs of mental illness or hostility toward the family. But then again, people can surprise you." Kowalski was beginning to get a read on Gregory Hollister. The man's answers were too precise, too carefully constructed. In 30 years of police work, Kowalski had learned to distinguish between shock and performance. "I'll need to interview Mr. Vasquez as soon as he's coherent. In the meantime, we'll be treating this as an attempted murder investigation." "Attempted murder?" Camila's voice rose. "My father would never." "Ma'am, someone deliberately added poison to food intended for consumption. That's the legal definition of attempted murder, regardless of the perpetrator's relationship to the victims." After taking their statements, Kowalski drove to the Vasquez house, now cordoned off as a crime scene. The forensics team was already at work, photographing everything and collecting samples. "What have you found?" he asked the lead technician. "Turkey tests positive for concentrated emetic compounds, enough to make people violently sick, but not lethal in the doses consumed. We found an empty vial in the kitchen trash, traces of the same compound. Fingerprints. Only Robert Vasquez's on the vial. But here's the interesting part. We found evidence of sophisticated surveillance equipment throughout the house. Wireless cameras, audio recorders, the works. All professionally installed, probably within the last few weeks." Kowalski felt the first stirring of suspicion. Who has access to this house? According to neighbors, just family. The daughter has a key, and the son-in-law, Gregory Hollister, visits regularly. Hollister's in private security, right? Yeah. Owns a company that does corporate surveillance and protection services. Kowalski stood in the kitchen, trying to piece together the timeline. A man with no apparent motive poisons his own family. But someone with expertise in surveillance has been monitoring the house. The son-in-law arrives late to dinner and somehow avoids eating the poisoned food. His phone rang. "Kowalski. Detective, this is Dr. Patricia Santos at Denver General. I've been treating the poisoning victims, and I thought you should know we found something unusual in Dr. Richmond's blood work." "What kind of unusual?" "He had elevated levels of gamma-hydroxybutyric acid in his system. GHB, the date rape drug." Kowalski's grip tightened on the phone. "How much?" "Not enough to incapacitate him, but enough to cause disorientation and memory problems. It would have been administered separately from the emetic compound." "Any idea when?" "Based on the levels, I'd say within 2 hours of admission. Probably around the time dinner started." Kowalski ended the call and looked around the kitchen with new eyes. This wasn't a simple case of food poisoning or even attempted murder. Someone had orchestrated an elaborate setup, and that someone had access to both military-grade emetic compounds and date rape drugs. Someone with the expertise to install surveillance equipment and the patience to plan every detail. Someone like Gregory Hollister. But proving it would be another matter entirely. Kowalski had the feeling he was dealing with a man who thought several moves ahead, who'd planned for every contingency. As he left the house, Kowalski's phone buzzed with a text from his partner. Just ran background checks. Hollister's company has contracts with half the corporations in Denver. Military Special Forces background. Clean record, but multiple civil suits from business rivals who claim he uses illegal surveillance methods. All suits settled out of court. Kowalski smiled grimly. Gregory Hollister might be a master planner, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the determination of a veteran detective who'd seen every trick in the book. The real investigation was just beginning. Chapter 5. Unraveling Threads. By Friday morning, Dr. Trevor Richmond was conscious but confused, his memory of Thanksgiving dinner fragmented and unclear. Detective Kowalski sat beside his hospital bed, notebook ready, watching the neurosurgeon struggle to piece together the previous evening. "I remember arriving at Robert's house," Trevor said, his voice hoarse. "Camila was there with Emma. We watched football, talked about. I can't remember what we talked about." "What about dinner itself?" "Fragments. The turkey was excellent. I remember that. Robert was proud of his cooking. Then I started feeling sick, and everything gets hazy." Kowalski leaned forward. "Dr. Richmond, I need to ask you about your relationship with Camila Hollister." Trevor's eyes sharpened despite his condition. "What do you mean?" "We found elevated levels of GHB in your bloodstream. Someone drugged you separately from the food poisoning. That suggests you were specifically targeted. GHB. But that would mean someone wanted you disoriented and confused. Someone who knew you'd be at that dinner." Trevor was quiet for a long moment, and Kowalski could see him weighing his words carefully. "Detective, I need to tell you something, but it's going to complicate things." "I'm listening." "Camila and we've been having an affair for 8 months. We were planning to tell Gregory after Thanksgiving that she wanted a divorce." Kowalski felt pieces clicking into place. "Did Mr. Hollister know about the affair?" "We thought we were careful. Camila was certain he didn't suspect anything." "But you're not so sure?" Trevor met his eyes. "Gregory Hollister is the most observant man I've ever met. He notices everything, remembers everything. If he wanted to know what his wife was doing, he'd find out. Do you think he orchestrated last night? I think Gregory Hollister is capable of anything when someone betrays him. Kowalski closed his notebook. Dr. Richmond, I need you to think carefully about the past few months. Any unusual encounters with Mr. Hollister? Times he seemed to know things he shouldn't? Trevor frowned, concentrating. There was something about 3 weeks ago. Camila and I met for lunch at the Riverside Hotel, like we always did. When I got back to the hospital, Gregory was waiting in my office. What do you want? He said he needed to discuss Emma's medical records for insurance purposes. But the conversation was strange. He asked about my schedule, whether I had any upcoming conferences, if I was planning to travel during the holidays. At the time, I thought he was just making conversation. But now I think he was gathering intelligence. Kowalski left the hospital with a growing certainty that Gregory Hollister had orchestrated the entire evening. But certainty wasn't evidence, and evidence was proving difficult to find. Hollister was too smart to leave obvious trails. His next stop was the forensics lab, where he hoped to find something more concrete. We finished processing the surveillance equipment from the Vasquez house, the lead technician reported. Professional-grade stuff, but here's the interesting part. All the serial numbers have been filed off. Untraceable. Not completely. We're running the components through federal databases, seeing if we can track the original purchases. But whoever installed this knew what they were doing. What about the poison? Concentrated emetic compound, military grade. Not something you can buy at the corner pharmacy. We're checking with Army surplus dealers. But again, someone with military connections could have multiple sources. Kowalski rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar frustration of a case where he knew the truth but couldn't prove it. Any other evidence from a scene? One thing that's bothering me. The empty vial in the trash. It's too convenient. If Robert Vasquez was trying to poison his family, why would he leave the evidence in his own kitchen trash can? And if he was having some kind of mental break, why was he coherent enough to hide the vial until after dinner, but careless enough to throw it away, where we'd find it? You think it was planted? I think someone wanted us to find it exactly where we did. Kowalski's phone rang. His partner had been working the financial angle. Ray, you need to hear this. Trevor Richmond recently took out a $2 million life insurance policy, with Camila Hollister listed as the sole beneficiary. When? 2 months ago. And here's the kicker. Camila increased her own life insurance to $3 million last month, with Richmond as the beneficiary. Kowalski felt a chill. They were planning for their future together. It gets worse. I pulled Gregory Hollister's financials. The man is worth $12 million, but most of it's tied up in his business. If Camila divorced him, she'd get maybe $2 million in liquid assets. But if something happened to her, he'd keep everything. And if something happened to both Camila and Trevor, their insurance policies would be nullified due to the circumstances of their deaths. Kowalski hung up and sat in his car, staring at the hospital entrance. Gregory Hollister hadn't just discovered his wife's affair. He'd discovered that she and her lover were planning a future together that would cost him millions of dollars and his daughter. But this was a man who'd built an empire by never letting anyone get the better of him. A man who'd learned in the military that the best defense was often a devastating offense. The poisoning hadn't been attempted murder. It had been the opening move in a much larger game. Kowalski started his car and headed toward Hollister Security Solutions. It was time to have a direct conversation with Gregory Hollister and see how the man reacted when pressured. He had the feeling that Thanksgiving dinner was just the beginning of Gregory's revenge. And if he was right, Camila Hollister and Trevor Richmond were in more danger than they realized. Chapter 6. The Web Titans. Gregory Hollister's office occupied the entire top floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Denver, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. When Detective Kowalski arrived at 2 p.m. Friday, he was immediately struck by the military precision of the space. Everything arranged with mathematical precision. No personal touches except for a single family photo on the massive desk. Detective Kowalski, Gregory said, rising from his chair with the fluid grace of a predator. I wasn't expecting you, but I'm happy to help however I can. I have some follow-up questions about yesterday's incident. Of course. Please have a seat. Kowalski settled into the leather chair across from Gregory's desk, noting how the arrangement forced him to look up slightly at Gregory, a psychological advantage that seemed carefully calculated. Mr. Hollister, we've discovered that Dr. Richmond was drugged with GHB in addition to the emetic compound in the turkey. Any thoughts on who might have done that? Gregory's expression remained perfectly neutral. GHB? That's disturbing. It suggests someone specifically targeted Trevor. Someone with access to date rape drugs and the opportunity to administer them during dinner. I suppose that narrows the field considerably. Gregory leaned back in his chair. Detective, may I ask where this investigation is heading? Dr. Richmond told me about his relationship with your wife. For the first time, Gregory's mask slipped slightly, just a momentary tightening around his eyes. I see. And what did he tell you? That they've been having an affair for 8 months. That they planned to tell you after Thanksgiving that she wanted a divorce. Gregory was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city below. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of resignation. I've suspected for some time. Camila has never been good at hiding her emotions. But you never confronted them? What would have been the point? If my wife had chosen someone else, forcing her to stay would only make us all miserable. Kowalski studied Gregory's face, looking for tells. The man was either genuinely hurt or an exceptional actor. Yet someone went to considerable trouble to orchestrate yesterday's events. You think this was orchestrated? Not just my father-in-law having some kind of breakdown. We found professional surveillance equipment throughout his house. Equipment that was installed recently by someone with expertise in electronic surveillance. Gregory's eyebrows rose slightly. That's certainly interesting. Do you have any suspects? Mr. Hollister, where did you go before arriving at your father-in-law's house yesterday? I stopped by the office to handle some urgent business. My assistant, Beverly, can confirm the time I left. And you didn't eat any of the turkey at dinner? I have a sensitive stomach. I rarely eat rich foods at family gatherings. Every answer was perfectly reasonable, completely plausible, and utterly unverifiable. Kowalski was beginning to understand why Gregory Hollister had been so successful in the private security world. The man could lie with the sincerity of a priest. Mr. Hollister, are you familiar with emetic compounds? From my military service, yes. We were trained to recognize various chemical agents, including how to obtain them. I suppose I'd know where to look if I ever needed such things for legitimate security purposes. Kowalski leaned forward. Let me be direct. Do you believe your father-in-law is guilty of attempted murder? Gregory was quiet for nearly a minute, apparently wrestling with the question. Detective Robert Vasquez is one of the most honest men I've ever known. He raised Camila to be loyal, trustworthy, and honorable. If he's guilty of anything, it's trusting the wrong people. The word seemed innocent enough, but Kowalski caught the subtle emphasis on loyal and trustworthy, qualities Gregory clearly felt his wife lacked. We also discovered that Dr. Richmond recently increased his life insurance, with your wife as the beneficiary. I wasn't aware of that. And your wife increased hers as well, with Richmond as the beneficiary. This time, Gregory's reaction was unmistakable, a flash of cold fury that transformed his features for just an instant before control reasserted itself. I see, he said quietly. They were planning for their future together. $2 million each. Substantial amounts. Indeed. Gregory stood and walked to the window, his back to Kowalski. Detective, let me save you some time. Yes, I knew about the affair. Yes, I knew about their plans. And yes, I've been angry about it. Kowalski felt a surge of adrenaline. Was Gregory actually going to confess? But I didn't poison anyone, Gregory continued, turning back to face him. I've built my entire life around the principle that when someone betrays you, you don't get mad, you get even. But you do it legally, systematically, and permanently. What does that mean? Gregory returned to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a thick folder. It means I've spent the last 4 months documenting every aspect of their relationship. Hotel receipts, phone records, photographs, financial transactions. Everything needed to ensure that when we go to court, I'll retain full custody of my daughter and the majority of my assets. He slid the folder across the desk. You'll find copies of everything in there. I was planning to present it to my attorney next week. Kowalski opened the folder and found himself looking at surveillance photos of Camila and Trevor entering hotels, bank records showing transfers between their accounts, and phone logs documenting hundreds of calls between them. "This is very thorough," he said. "I'm a thorough man, detective. When someone betrays me, I don't react emotionally. I plan methodically, and poisoning them at Thanksgiving dinner fits that pattern." Gregory smiled, the first genuine smile Kowalski had seen from him. "Detective, if I want to hurt my wife and her lover, would I do it in a way that left my 4-year-old daughter as a witness? Would I use traceable compounds and leave obvious evidence? Would I involve my father-in-law, a man I genuinely respect?" The logic was compelling, and Kowalski found himself nodding despite his suspicions. "No," Gregory continued. "If I were going to destroy them, I'd do it the way I always destroy my enemies, completely, legally, and permanently. By the time I finished with them, they'd lose everything that mattered while I kept everything that mattered to me." Kowalski closed the folder, more confused than ever. Either Gregory Hollister was innocent, or he was the most dangerous man the detective had ever encountered. Someone capable of orchestrating an elaborate frame-up while simultaneously presenting himself as the voice of reason. "Mr. Hollister, I appreciate your cooperation. We'll be in touch if we have more questions." As Kowalski left the building, his phone buzzed with a text from his partner. "Just got word from the hospital. Robert Vasquez is awake and asking to talk. Says he remembers something important about Thanksgiving dinner." Kowalski changed direction and headed back to Denver General, hoping that Robert Vasquez would finally provide the missing piece of the puzzle. But as he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that Gregory Hollister had orchestrated their entire conversation, leading him to exactly the conclusions he wanted him to reach. The question was, which version of Gregory Hollister was real? The wronged husband seeking legal justice, or the calculating predator who'd spent months planning the perfect revenge? Chapter 7. The Truth Emerges. Robert Vasquez looked older than his 63 years as he lay in a hospital bed, his weathered hands shaking slightly as Detective Kowalski pulled up a chair. The older man's eyes were clear now, but haunted by the realization of what he'd done. "Detective, I need to tell you what really happened," Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper. "About the powder, about Gregory, about everything." Kowalski leaned forward, sensing he was finally about to hear the truth. "Take your time, Mr. Vasquez. Gregory came to my house on Wednesday, 2 days before Thanksgiving. He brought that powder with him." Robert's voice cracked. "He told me it was a special seasoning from Afghanistan, something that would make the turkey unforgettable. Said it had to be our secret, because the surprise would be ruined if anyone knew." "Did you believe him?" "I wanted to." Robert closed his eyes. "Gregory has always been good to my family. When Camila's mother died 5 years ago, he paid for everything. The funeral, the hospital bills, my grief counseling. When my truck broke down last year, he bought me a new one. Said it was a late Christmas present." Kowalski made notes, beginning to see the pattern. Gregory had been building loyalty, creating obligations. "But Wednesday, something felt different," Robert continued. "Gregory seemed intense, more than usual. He kept asking questions about who would be at dinner, what time we'd eat, whether anyone had allergies or dietary restrictions." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That would be family, maybe Dr. Richmond if Camila invited him." Gregory's face changed when I mentioned Trevor. Got real cold real fast. "Did he say anything about Dr. Richmond?" Robert nodded slowly. "Said he hoped Trevor would come, that it would make Thanksgiving complete." The way he said it, it gave me chills. "But you still use the powder?" "God help me, yes." Robert's voice broke completely. "He's my son-in-law. He's been like a son to me. When he asked me to trust him, I did." Kowalski studied the older man's face, seeing genuine anguish. "Mr. Vasquez, do you think Gregory knew about the affair?" "I've been thinking about that since I woke up. Little things I'd noticed, but ignored. The way Gregory watched Camila when she talked about Trevor. How he'd ask casual questions about her schedule, her friends, where she was going." "You think he was investigating her?" "I think Gregory Hollister doesn't do anything without a reason. And I think I was just a tool in whatever game he's playing." Kowalski's phone buzzed. A text from the forensics lab. Serial numbers on surveillance equipment traced. Purchased by Shell, company registered to Hollister Security Solutions 3 months ago. Mr. Vasquez, there's something else I need to ask you. Has Gregory been in your house recently? Maybe to install something or make repairs. He installed a new security system last month. Said the neighborhood was getting rougher, that he worried about me living alone. Spent 2 days there with his crew, wiring cameras and sensors. The final piece clicked into place. Gregory hadn't just surveilled his wife's affair. He'd been planning this for months. The security system gave him access to Robert's house, the ability to monitor who came and went, when they met, what they discussed. Detective, Robert said urgently, you have to understand, Gregory isn't just smart. He's patient, ruthless. When we served together in Afghanistan. You served together? Not together, but our units crossed paths. I was regular Army, he was Special Forces. But I heard stories about what he did to insurgents who betrayed local allies, about how he'd set up elaborate traps that destroyed entire cells. Robert's eyes met Kowalski's. If Gregory wanted to destroy my daughter and Trevor, he wouldn't do it fast. He'd do it slow, methodically, making sure they lost everything that mattered to them. What do you think Thursday night was really about? I think it was the opening move. A way to put Trevor in the hospital, separate him from Camila, make them both vulnerable. Robert gripped the detective's arm. And I think whatever he's planning next is going to be worse. Kowalski left the hospital with a growing sense of urgency. Gregory's plan was clearly more elaborate than a simple poisoning. The man had spent months preparing, gathering intelligence, building loyalty with Robert, installing surveillance equipment. His phone rang as he reached his car. Detective Kowalski? This is Dr. Santos at Denver General. I thought you should know. Dr. Richmond checked himself out of the hospital an hour ago, against medical advice. Did he say where he was going? He received a phone call that seemed to upset him greatly. Something about Mrs. Hollister being in danger. Kowalski's blood ran cold. Who called him? I don't know, but he left immediately afterward. Took a taxi toward downtown. Kowalski was already starting his car. Gregory had just made his next move, and Trevor Richmond was walking directly into whatever trap had been prepared for him. As he raced toward downtown Denver, Kowalski tried calling both Trevor's and Camila's phones. Both went straight to voicemail. Gregory Hollister had been planning this for months, thinking several moves ahead while everyone else played catch-up. And now, with Trevor out of the hospital and Camila isolated, the real game was about to begin. Kowalski pressed harder on the accelerator, praying he wouldn't be too late to prevent Gregory from completing whatever revenge he'd been orchestrating. Because men like Gregory Hollister didn't just destroy their enemies, they obliterated them, leaving nothing behind but cautionary tales. Chapter 8. The Trap Springs. Trevor Richmond stood outside the abandoned warehouse in Denver's industrial district, his hands shaking as he read the text message for the 3rd time. Camila in danger. Come alone to 3847 Industrial Way. Say nothing to police. You have 30 minutes. A friend. The message had arrived while he was arguing with Dr. Santos about checking out of the hospital. In his drugged and disoriented state, the threat to Camila overrode all rational thought. Now, standing in the evening shadows with Denver's skyline glowing in the distance, he began to realize he'd made a terrible mistake. His phone buzzed. Another message. Enter through the east door. 2nd floor. Come alone or she dies. Trevor approached the building with growing dread. The warehouse had been abandoned for years, its windows broken and walls covered in graffiti. Perfect for someone who wanted to conduct business away from prying eyes. The east door stood slightly ajar. Trevor pushed it open and found himself in a vast, empty space illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. A narrow staircase led to what had once been office space on the 2nd floor. Camila, he called out, his voice echoing in the emptiness. Up here, came a voice that wasn't Camila's. Trevor climbed the stairs slowly, every instinct screaming at him to run. But if Camila was really in danger, he couldn't abandon her. The 2nd floor had been converted into a single large room. Camila sat in a chair in the center, duct tape over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Standing behind her, dressed in black tactical gear, was Gregory Hollister. "Hello, Trevor," Gregory said conversationally. "Thank you for coming so promptly." "Let her go, Gregory. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you." "What I want." Gregory walked around the chair, his hand resting on Camila's shoulder. "I want my wife to honor her marriage vows. I want my daughter to grow up in an intact family. I want people to keep their promises when they make them." Trevor noticed the rope coiled on a nearby table, the plastic sheeting spread across the floor, the various tools arranged with military precision. "This isn't going to solve anything." "You're wrong about that." Gregory pulled out his phone and showed Trevor a video playing on the screen. "Do you recognize this?" It was security footage from the Riverside Hotel showing Trevor and Camila entering a room together. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. "I have hundreds of hours of footage like this," Gregory continued. "Photos, phone recordings, bank records. Everything needed to destroy both your reputations and careers. So destroy us. Ruin our lives. But don't hurt Camila." Gregory laughed, a sound completely devoid of warmth. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about punishment. It's about erasure." He moved to the table and picked up a syringe filled with clear liquid. "Do you know what this is, Dr. Richmond?" "It's concentrated potassium chloride, the same drug used in lethal injections. Virtually undetectable if administered properly." Trevor's medical training kicked in despite his fear. "It would cause cardiac arrest. Look like a heart attack." "Exactly. And after the stress of the last few days, the poisoning, the investigation, the guilt over your affair, who would question it? The police know about us. They'll investigate." "Will they?" A prominent neurosurgeon, overwhelmed by guilt, takes his own life in a moment of despair. Very tragic, but hardly suspicious. Gregory moved closer, the syringe gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Of course, your death will devastate my poor wife. The guilt of knowing her affair drove you to suicide, might even push her over the edge herself." Trevor finally understood the full scope of Gregory's plan. "You're going to kill us both and make it look like murder-suicide. A love triangle gone wrong. The betrayed husband, the guilty lovers, a tragic ending that will make headlines for a week before everyone moves on to the next scandal. What about Emma? She's your daughter." For the first time, Gregory's expression softened slightly. "Emma will grow up knowing her mother died in a tragic accident, that her father tried to build a good life for them both, but couldn't overcome the trauma. She'll have the best therapy money can buy, the finest education, every advantage I can provide. And she'll never know the truth." "The truth?" Gregory's voice turned ice-cold again. "The truth is that her mother betrayed their family for a man she barely knew. The truth is that you encouraged her to abandon her marriage, her responsibilities, her daughter's welfare for your selfish desires." Gregory raised the syringe. "I'm not the villain in this story, Dr. Richmond. I'm the man cleaning up the mess you both made." Trevor looked around desperately, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. But Gregory had been planning this for months, thinking through every contingency. "Before you die," Gregory continued, "I want you to know that I watched every moment of your affair. Every meeting, every kiss, every time you told my wife you loved her. I have recordings of you planning to take my daughter away from me. We never. You promised to help her get full custody. You discussed moving to California together, starting fresh where I'd never find you." Gregory's grip tightened on the syringe. "Did you really think you could steal my family and face no consequences?" Trevor realized that begging wouldn't save them. Gregory had moved beyond anger into something colder and more dangerous. The methodical fury of a predator who'd been betrayed by his own pack. "Any last words, Dr. Richmond?" Trevor looked at Camila, seeing the terror in her eyes, the desperate hope that somehow this nightmare would end differently. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was apologizing to her, or to Gregory, or to the daughter who would grow up without her mother. Gregory raised the syringe toward Trevor's neck, his finger on the plunger. The warehouse door exploded inward. "Denver police. Drop the weapon." Detective Kowalski stood in the doorway, his service weapon drawn, backup officers flooding in behind him. Gregory smiled and stepped backward, the syringe still in his hand. "Detective Kowalski, I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Put the syringe down, Gregory. It's over." "Is it?" Gregory's voice remained calm, conversational. "Do you have any evidence that I committed a crime? Any proof that I'm here against my will?" Kowalski moved closer, his weapon trained on Gregory. "Step away from your wife." "My wife who's been having an affair for 8 months? My wife who planned to steal my daughter and move across the country?" Gregory shook his head. "I think I'll keep her close. Last warning. Drop the weapon." Gregory looked at the syringe, then at Trevor, then at Camila. For a moment, his carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing something raw and wounded underneath. "Do you know what the worst part is?" he asked quietly. "I would have given her everything. Anything she wanted. All she had to do was ask." Then the mask returned, cold and final. "But she chose to betray me instead." Gregory lunged toward Trevor, syringe raised. Kowalski fired twice. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. 6 months later, Detective Ray Kowalski sat in his car outside Riverside Cemetery, watching Camila Hollister place flowers on a small grave. The headstone read Gregory David Hollister, loving father, with dates that captured 38 years of life that had ended in violence and betrayal. The official investigation had concluded that Gregory Hollister had suffered a psychological break following the discovery of his wife's affair, leading to the elaborate plan that culminated in the warehouse confrontation. The media had portrayed it as a tragedy, a decorated veteran and successful businessman destroyed by personal betrayal. Only a few people knew the complete truth. Camila looked older than her 32 years as she walked back to her car. The trauma of that night had aged her, carved lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She'd inherited Gregory's business empire, but the weight of it seemed to crush her rather than liberate her. Kowalski got out of his car and approached her. "Mrs. Hollister." She looked up, startled. "Detective, I didn't expect to see you here. I come by sometimes." Still trying to understand what happened. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Two people haunted by the same night for different reasons. "How's Emma?" Kowalski asked. "She's adjusting. The therapist says children are resilient, but she still asks when daddy's coming home." Camila's voice cracked slightly. "I tell her he's watching over us from heaven." "And Dr. Richmond?" Camila's expression hardened. "Trevor left Denver 3 weeks after the incident. Took a position at a hospital in Boston. Said he couldn't handle the memories." "Are you in contact with him?" "No." The word came out sharp, bitter. Turns out his love wasn't as strong as his sense of self-preservation. Kowalski studied her face, seeing the anger beneath the grief. Gregory's final revenge had been more complete than even he'd probably imagined. He destroyed not just Trevor's life in Denver, but also the relationship between the two lovers. "Mrs. Hollister, can I ask you something? Did you ever suspect that Gregory knew about the affair?" Camila was quiet for a long time, staring at her husband's grave. Looking back, there were signs. Little things. The way he'd watch me when I thought he wasn't looking. Questions that seemed innocent but felt like tests. "Why didn't you just ask for a divorce?" "Because I was a coward." The admission came out raw, honest. "I knew Gregory would never let me take Emma, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing my daughter. So I convinced myself I could have both, my marriage and my affair, until I worked up the courage to choose. And Gregory knew you'd never choose willingly. Gregory understood me better than I understood myself. He knew I'd keep living the lie indefinitely rather than face the consequences of the truth." Kowalski watched her for a moment, then made a decision. "Mrs. Hollister, there's something you should know. Something that wasn't in the official report." She looked at him sharply. "What?" "The surveillance equipment in your father's house. The poison used at Thanksgiving dinner. The warehouse where Gregory took you. None of it was random. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. I know that. But what you don't know is that he had backup plans. Multiple scenarios depending on how events unfolded." Kowalski pulled out a folder from his jacket. "We found these in his office safe after he died." Camila opened the folder and found detailed plans for various scenarios. If the affair had ended voluntarily. If she'd asked for divorce amicably. If Trevor had left Denver on his own. In every scenario, Gregory had mapped out ways to destroy both their lives while protecting his own interests. He never intended to let you go, Kowalski said quietly. Not alive, not with Emma, not with any kind of future. Camila read through the documents, her face growing paler with each page. My God, he really would have killed us both. I think by the end, yes. Gregory Hollister was a man who'd built his entire identity around control, loyalty, and never showing weakness. Your affair didn't just betray him. It threatened everything he believed about himself. So what happens now? Kowalski looked at Gregory's grave, then back at Camila. Now you build a life. You raise your daughter. You try to forgive yourself for the choices you made. And you think I can do that? I think you're stronger than you know. You survived Gregory Hollister's final game. That takes more courage than most people have. As Kowalski drove away, he reflected on the case that had consumed 6 months of his life. Gregory Hollister had been brilliant, methodical, and utterly ruthless. But in the end, his need for absolute control had been his downfall. He'd planned for every contingency except the possibility that someone might see through his deceptions. Camila would rebuild her life, Emma would grow up with the best therapy money could buy, and Trevor Richmond would always live with the knowledge that his actions had led to tragedy. But Gregory Hollister's final lesson would live on. That betrayal carried consequences, and some people never forgave, never forgot, and never let their enemies escape unpunished. In the end, everyone had paid a price for their choices. The only question was whether the cost had been worth it. As the sun set over Denver, Detective Kowalski headed home to his own family, grateful for their ordinary problems and simple loyalties. He'd seen what happened when love turned to obsession, when hurt became hatred, when a brilliant mind decided that destruction was preferable to defeat. Gregory Hollister had gotten his revenge, even in death. His wife would spend the rest of her life haunted by guilt. His daughter would grow up without her mother's lover in their lives, and his name would be remembered as a cautionary tale about the price of betrayal. It wasn't